Welcome to Outpatient Radio, a chronic pain listening project produced by the UC Davis Center for Design in the Public Interest for KKRN 88.5 FM in Round Mountain, California. I'm Tracy Manuel. Today we'll hear from pain patients across Northern California as we try to reimagine the ways we listen to pain. This is a 3-part special weaving together the stories of 8 chronic pain patients from Solano to Sacramento to Shasta County. We'll look at the impacts of chronic pain on day-to-day life, explore the good and bad of pain treatment, and try to understand what it means to get better. Just a note, to protect the privacy of our incredible respondents, all patients will be referred to by pseudonyms. And though we hope you'll learn a lot, anything you hear on this program is for general information purposes only. The show isn't intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should always get advice from a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you have regarding a medical condition, and don't disregard any professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you've heard here. All right, I think we're ready. Thanks for joining us. Here's part 1, pain points.
My biggest thing is the line, get well soon or hope you feel better soon. And I want to say, what part of chronic didn't you get?
This is Tiff. She's been dealing with chronic pain for over 20 years.
I can't really think of a time I didn't experience pain. And so, I was really sick as a kid with a variety of things. And then the chronic pain started at 15. At that time, the doctor who finally diagnosed me said, we're really only seeing this in women in their 40s and 50s. And so 15 was really outside the norm for what they were seeing. And I've experienced that kind of over the years. A lot of doctors and medical professionals not believing, you're too young to experience this kind of pain. You don't look like you're in pain. I get that one all the time, actually.
A 2012 study showed that at least 25.3 million Americans suffer from daily chronic pain. That's about the population of the entire state of Florida. The International Association for the Study of Pain defines chronic pain as any pain lasting for 3 or more months. We've all experienced pain, like a pounding headache or a stubbed toe. But chronic pain persists. And for our interviewees, it has persisted for years. Tiff's pain comes from fibromyalgia, or fibro, a chronic disorder where a person's joints, muscles, and other soft tissues are sensitive to touch, causing widespread pain. Fibro patients reporting to the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, describe their pain as feeling like anything from pins and needles to being pounded by a meat tenderizer.
Okay, granted, it hurts. It's not a fun feeling. There's memes that go around that say, good news about fibromyalgia. It won't kill you. It'll just make you feel like you're dead.
During the work week, Tiff is a practicing LCSW, or licensed clinical social worker. She actually works to help pain patients from Placer to Solano County get the treatment they need. She also helps train other professionals on the ins and outs of caring for patients in pain. She emphasizes that pain is highly individual and doesn't always show up in the ways you might expect.
And having to train the staff, who some of them have never experienced anything like this, and stare at me and go, there's no way that your pain level can be at a 7 and you're standing there and smiling. And I turned to them and I said, I had to do a presentation to the boards of supervisors with kidney stones, so I can do a lot. And they've actually been pretty responsive.
This is what we want to talk about today: pain. In these conversations, we got to explore pain in new ways that don't tend to surface in everyday conversation. The reason this is so important and so difficult to do is that pain is something we often don't talk openly about. We don't always want to be that person who brings it up over dinner. But even in the doctor's office where we're supposed to talk about it, we might only have a few minutes to skim over the main points before time's up. Whether you, a friend, a family member, a loved one, or a complete stranger is the one experiencing pain in a given moment, we could all benefit from time and space to speak and listen in different ways.
The word hurt or pain has to do, to me, with a pulsing, a measurable thing, that's separate from the condition of my body and its ability to function. It's separate from the fact that I have to be very careful how I get out of this chair.
This is Bailey. She's from the Sacramento area and experiences migraines and ataxia, a disorder where a person loses function in their muscles and nerves. Bailey has to manage a number of different symptoms from headaches to nausea to vertigo. Throughout the years, she's learned how to identify triggers and adjust her lifestyle, but it hasn't always been easy.
I would find if I read too long or used my computer or did something like go to an art museum, after 50 minutes, I would just be deathly ill. I might have to just go somewhere in the art gallery and lie down on a bench or whatever. And I've done this in museums, in different places. I don't care. I'm sick. I have to do this. Until I learned to identify the red flags that are saying you're overdoing it, I would keep trying to be normal and keep a pace that was way beyond my capacity, and I would really get in trouble.
It turns out that Bailey struggles in environments that involve lots of movement and visual scanning. Tracking and managing her condition alone is a tall order. But if you talk to anyone with chronic pain, you'll start to realize that the experience of living with pain runs much deeper than symptoms alone.
For me, the lack of ability to stand up for very long limits my ability to do ordinary daily tasks. Cleaning up, doing the laundry, reaching in and out of the dryer and the washer, folding clothes. I can plan on resting for an unlimited amount of time depending on how long I have done those motions. It's no longer jump in the shower, shampoo your hair and dry it, throw on some clothes and run out the door. Those words are history. And that planning makes everything really methodical. It takes the spontaneity out of life.
For people like Bailey, pain can mean building a life around an entirely different blueprint, one full of lifestyle changes, medications, rest, physical therapy, missed parties, you name it.
I used to be a person who could go up a clip wall like this free-handed. I used to be able to do things like that, and now I can't.
This is Red. She, her husband, her daughter, and her donkeys, goats, and other animals live in the mountains of far northern California. Red injured a disc in her back that's made it hard for her to be as mobile as she'd like to be.
My husband's always telling me, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy. And I'm like, you don't know how hard it is to. I've just always been out there working hard. And now to have to suddenly take it slow, it's really hard to accept,
Any injury that majorly disrupts everyday life can be hard to accept. Red's back injury happened in a split second.
When I first agitated my disc, I would put my daughter down in her bed, and then I went to put the toy on the ground, and I went to stand up, and I couldn't stand up. It's just like I started crying out, and tears were coming out of my face. My husband came running inside and had to actually kind of pick me up onto the bed, and I'm not a light person, It was really bad. I couldn't walk very much and everything like that. And unfortunately, I've had a pretty rough life where I've had to suck it up, so to say. I had no choice. I couldn't show pain, so I kind of apply that to day-to-day life.
We asked Red what the hardest part about living with pain is.
Not being able to do what I used to be able to do. I think, it's really hard doing what I used to be able to do, and I can't pick up my daughter as much or hold her as long, and that's a real hard thing too, it's because I want to be able to pick her up and toss her in the air and everything like that, and I can't. She doesn't know that Mommy could play with her so much more. you know.
Coming to terms with chronic pain is an identity shift. Take it from Leonard, an ex-manager from the oil industry who, like Red, now lives up in the woods of Upper NorCal.
I've had a bad neck since I was a child, and my parents just thought it was cricks in my neck. And then I worked in oil refineries all my life. I was a manager. I managed operation crews. It's not the daintiest job in the world. I started being a manager when I was 20 years old with no education. I didn't graduate from high school, so it was a big responsibility for a long time.
After years of doing this, Leonard's neck pain made it harder and harder for him to keep working. But even after he left the industry, pain made life complicated.
And before I got on disability, there was I had left work, and there was a period of about 1.5 years where my youngest son and I lived on welfare. For the first time of my life, I had to go on welfare. And that was hard. And then I realized one day that I'm disabled. I was hurt emotionally. And I didn't want to be disabled. Almost makes me cry right now. I don't want to be, I'm still 18 in my mind. I want to be indestructible. But I came to terms with it that day.
It can be a jarring identity shift, and it comes with a number of external pressures.
It's all hard. There's nothing easy about being in pain. The easiest part about being in pain is the pain. The hardest part's the treatment and the stigma. There's a stigma where you're in pain, you're getting Social Security, you're on disability, and you're taking meds, and until someone witnesses you actually turning white with pain, they don't understand it. Almost no one does.
For Leonard, it's gotten to the point where even talking about pain isn't worth the risk.
That's a piece of advice I've got for other folks with chronic pain on opioids, is you need to know when to keep your mouth shut. Be careful who you talk to, because it could come back on you. And I'm talking about family, friends, and just people I don't even know. You get a look, about 90% of the time they'll say, you need to get off of those. That's bad. There's a lot of people abusing that. There's people ODing. It's hard.
We all like to believe that we can fix the things in our lives that are broken. With chronic pain, that's not always an option. But then again, not doing anything about it usually isn't an option either. Up next, we'll talk about treatment. Stay tuned. You're listening to Outpatient Radio, a chronic pain listening project produced by the UC Davis Center for Design in the Public Interest for KKRN 88.5 FM in Round Mountain, California. Today, we're sharing the stories of chronic pain patients across the North State as we try to reimagine the ways we listen to pain. And as we've mentioned before, anything you hear on this program is for general information purposes only. The show isn't intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always get advice from a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and don't disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you've heard here. If you're just joining us, we just got an inside look at the everyday experience of living with chronic pain. We're about to hear some good and some not so good stories about getting treatment. Here's part 2, Medical Matters. To say Roxanne has had an interesting life would be an understatement. Case in point, she used to do pest control inspections for famous Hollywood A-listers.
Purple velvet wallpaper and tiger custom printed carpet. Yeah, hello. I got to go through his closets and everything.
But she's also seen a lot as a chronic pain patient dealing with adhesions, bands of scar tissue that form between abdominal tissues and organs.
Adhesions, have you ever tried to get rid of ivy in your yard? Yeah, the English ivy, no matter how much you dig it up, it always comes back. The best way to describe it would be tissue growth that goes like ivy. If you have surgery to remove it, it makes it grow back, so it's kind of a never-ending vicious cycle. It almost killed me once.
Adhesions can be painful and restricting on a day-to-day basis, but they can also be life-threatening. That's something that Roxanne has experienced firsthand when she struggled to get the medical attention she needed.
The pain got so bad, I sent a letter to the president of the organization who got me in to see another surgeon who told me it was phantom pain. I just liked being on pain pills. Suck it up, goodbye. And a week and a half later, I was having emergency surgery in the middle of the night, or I would have died had they waited another 24 hours.
Though Roxanne's story is an extreme example, it does shine a harsh light on some of the difficulties of treating and being treated for pain. In 2011, the Institute of Medicine found that chronic pain is undertreated in the U.S. And not only is pain undertreated, but the quality of your care can be influenced by a number of factors beyond your control. The color of your skin, your age, your gender, or whether or not English is your first language. At the heart of this deeply tangled issue is the doctor-patient relationship. And just a side note, whether we use the word doctor or provider or specialist in this show, we're really talking about all of the different clinicians a pain patient might see. And of course, it's incredibly important to work with a healthcare team that has a deep understanding of chronic pain.
My primary care physician is amazing. He actually, reads everything that's happening along the way. So whenever I see him for a checkup, he's read the notes that the other doctors have put in the file. So I'm never having to catch him up. And then my doctors are also very good about telling me explicitly who they're going to CC on something. And sometimes it'll be like, they'll be writing the note in front of me and going, okay, and I'm CCing your primary on this, and I'm seeing you're this person. Is there anybody else that needs to see this? So yeah, I feel like I do have a good team now. That hasn't always been true, and I think everybody struggles with finding their people. I know my primary care is good because when other doctors hear that he's my primary, they're jealous. And they're like, oh, he's the best one. And I'm like, I know. So, yeah.
Olivia is an educator who's dealt with headaches, back pain, and a few other things.
It took us a while to figure out what this was, but I did not know you can get abdominal migraines. A migraine in your abdomen, it's similar to a migraine headache in that it's caused by a blood flow and a constriction problem.
Like many people living with chronic pain, Olivia is a veteran of the medical system and has worked with a wide variety of specialists. She told us about an experience that stood out for her.
Like one time I was needing more pain relief than I was getting, that's just a chronic problem. But my doctor had just put me on a new medication, and he said, so I can't put you on another one because then we won't know what's working. And so I said, well, what if we did a topical though? And he was like, that's a great idea. And, instead of just going, oh, silly patient, what do you know? He was able to listen and to let me be part of the management of my own care, which is really good. So I do feel really good with my team right now.
Still, there's a lot that can get in the way. Short appointment slots, rigid insurance policies, and poor resource distribution can all interfere with two people, a patient and a provider, sitting down and really listening to one another. Ideally, a provider and a patient decide on a treatment plan together and then measure improvement based on functional goals. One major difficulty faced by providers is accurately assessing a patient's pain. There are a number of clinical tools used to help with this. one of which you might recognize if you've ever so much as set foot in an exam room.
They will ask you, what is your pain level from 0 to 10? Yes, I got so tired of being asked that.
This is Frida, and she's looking at the Wong-Baker Faces Pain Rating Scale. You know, that chart that nurses have with the row of smiley faces that turn into frowny faces with the numbers underneath, with 1 being no pain and 10 being the worst pain imaginable. The Wong-Baker Faces Pain Scale was developed from drawings made by children in intensive care units. It was part of a wave of new pain assessment tools in the 80s and 90s and is now found in exam rooms from coast to coast. These tools, including the widely used numeric pain rating scale, are certainly simple and easy to use. One problem with them is that pain is subjective from person to person and can also change over time. Frida, the patient we last heard from, has a number of other strategies for communicating her pain level of various degrees of seriousness.
So how this came up, I don't know, but I decided to describe my levels of pain based on different cities in California. I would use these as a code word for my husband, my partner, by saying Barstow. I'm in Barstow. I don't mean to offend anyone from Barstow, but if you've ever been there, that would be like a 10. Yeah, close to a 9 or a 10. Barstow's like, it's just a kind of a pit stop, you know, it's when I was really having a lot of pain, and my husband bought me a t-shirt from Barstow, so I would just put that t-shirt on. And, you know, it helps to bring a little humor in.
Frida doesn't just map her pain across California. She's developed techniques to observe and record its progress across her own body. Frida suffers from complex regional pain syndrome, which involves excessive pain and other symptoms concentrated in certain parts of the body. For Frida, it's concentrated on her left side, which has impacted her range of motion. However, she's still been able to use the right side of her body to do something she loves: art.
After my spinal surgery, when I was recovering, I was absolutely bereft, lonely, isolated. I mean, all the words that I'm sure other chronic pain patients can relate to. And I was, one day, I picked up my watercolor set and I literally vomited art for days. The walls were about this white and I would literally paint. I mean, I was doing these designs like trees with branches, and it was so joyful, you know? It was so joyful. And my husband came home and he was just like, "Oh, you've been busy." All of the walls were, in some way, were painted with something.
In addition to painting on the walls, Frida uses art as a tool to communicate what she feels in her body.
At the same time I worked with a somatic therapist, I was creating art that represented how I was feeling. So using the body art for those times when I was in the deepest pain. I know that you can't see this on the radio program, but it's a sketch of, as you can see, I feel like that injury to my back was like a viper sting. Just all this darkness and pain here, flames coming from the shoulder.
Frida hasn't had much luck using her body art to communicate her pain in a medical setting. What has worked, however, is something Frida's husband helped her come up with: the medical resume.
He took my main history and he put it on one sheet of paper, kind of meeting the doctors at a language that they know. Don't show them the artwork, but show them the history and symptoms. So we put it all on one page and then, provided it to the physicians. It has gone over well.
As a patient, good communication depends on a lot, From knowing the right questions to ask, to having trust in your own experience, to even just having the energy to advocate for yourself.
Because if you're in pain, you're grieving the loss of so much of your body, and then you're having to be an advocate for yourself. So exhausting. When you first get injured, it's like you're being shot into the pinball machine, and you go back and forth between a series of tests and that. And I know that they're trying to rule things out, but it's just a simple question of them listening, maybe putting themselves in our shoes, kind of trusting that the patients do know.
Trust is a big deal. And trust should obviously go both ways, between both doctor and patient. But there's also another kind of trust that needs to be in place, the kind that happens within, between a person and themselves.
It's a matter of being honest with yourself. I can lie to myself in a heartbeat, just like that. I always want more pain medicine, okay? It's just the way it is. Knowing that my body craves more on a daily basis, I have to be able to extract, does it really need it or does it just want it? It's a matter of need versus want.
This is James, and he's talking about a certain class of pain medications that have been on every news anchor's tongue these past few years. Opioid medications, aka opiates or narcotics, are at the heart of what some are calling the worst drug crisis in the nation's history. The U.S. makes up 5% of the world's population, but it consumes 80% of the world's opioids. Prescription opioids now surpass cocaine and heroin as the leading cause of drug-related death in the U.S. Opioids can help some chronic pain sufferers retain mobility and overall quality of life. What's interesting, though, is that while studies haven't shown any clear long-term benefits from using opioids for chronic pain, they have shown clear and serious risks. Opioids affect people differently, and it's impossible to predict how much a person's pain might decrease from taking opioids or how their quality of life could be affected. Here's James again.
I was probably 23 years old. And I've always done really physical labor. I was delivering produce in Sacramento, out of Sacramento. And it just started in my legs started hurting, back started hurting real bad. So I went to the doctor and they took some films and x-ray only. And they said, wow, have you been how many car wrecks have you been in? None. So yeah, well, your spine is bad. So even at 23, they told me I had the spine of an 80-year-old man. It's called early onset degenerative disc disease. You know, the disc spaces in your spine, over time, we all lose the fluid in those and they shrink. Mine just happened to be shrinking real soon, real early. But it began just like that and went just the way the doctors said it would. He said, you will never get better. You will only get worse.
That's not an easy place to have to start from as a 23-year-old. And a lot has happened between then and now.
The pain medication here is a big part of my story. Back in 2002, they put me on, started with just Norco, and then eventually I bounced around to different doctors for different reasons. And then in 2010, I had the low back surgery, and they said, you'll be out of the hospital in 3-4 days and go home some recovery time. Well, no, I had to go to a rehab hospital for a month because I couldn't walk. So then I went home in my pajamas and I spent the next 5 years there. And that was a combination of having been on the opiate medications, such high doses for so long. And then, of course, the surgery it destroyed me. It made me turn into that 80-year-old man. They said I was going to be. When it started getting really bad, I just figured, well, I need more medicine. And the doctors agreed. And I just went that way for as long as I could. You can't do that on opiate pain medication. You can't do that. You cannot keep going higher and higher.
James ended up dealing with serious withdrawals and coming off his high dosage, something he wants to warn other patients about.
If you're going to choose to go on opiate pain medications, keep your levels low, because the faster you go up, the faster your body adjusts to it and the less time you have of it being beneficial to you. Be careful, be aware, research the pain medications, talk to people that are on them, find out what they've gone through.
At the end of the day, it comes down to knowing your body, working with your healthcare team to find a treatment that works for you, and focusing on management.
It's management. It really is. And you just have to find the best way to manage your situation. Just don't give in to it, ever. Don't give in to it. Fight it. Don't stop. Take breaks. Rest. Get up, keep walking. Absolutely.
That might be harder on some days than others. But folks in pain have come up with lots of different ways to take care of themselves. Up next, we're going to take a look at management and recovery to try to tease apart what healing looks like for someone with chronic pain. Stay with us. If you're just joining us, this is Outpatient Radio, a chronic pain listening project produced by the UC Davis Center for Design in the Public Interest for KKRN 88.5 FM in Round Mountain, California. Today, we're sharing the stories of chronic pain patients across the North State as we try to reimagine the ways we listen to pain. And of course, anything you hear on this program is for general information purposes only. The show isn't intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always get medical advice from a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and don't disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you've heard here. Earlier, we got an inside look at the very individual, everyday experiences of living with chronic pain. We asked patients about their treatment experiences. And now we're about to explore what it means, and if it's possible, to get better. Get ready for part 3, Better Yet.
I know when people go, or you're recovering from something, a lot of times people immediately jump to the thought of, like, you have a cold and you've recovered from it, the symptoms are all gone. I think with things like chronic pain or invisible illness, or including mental illness, recovery is a different concept. And you have to look at how you cope with what you're dealing with and living your life, and your ability to live your life despite what you've got going on. I think that's possible, but I don't think in the traditional sense recovery or healing is possible, not from something like what I've got going on.
That was Tiff, the clinical social worker and fibromyalgia patient we heard from in part 1. She, like many folks who live with chronic pain every day, has had to adopt a nuanced perspective of what it means to get better.
I'm never going to fully get better from this. I'm always going to have some level of pain. And I recognize that. I want to get back to the point where I can enjoy my life again. I do a lot of photography, and I used to do a lot more, and used to be out with my camera pretty much every weekend doing some sort of shoot. Used to be known to do anything for a shot, including jumping out of a moving vehicle one time. My husband was not happy with me on that. Neither were my doctors, actually. But I want to get back to that version of myself. And being, not necessarily jumping out of a moving vehicle, but being able to be more active and carry my 25-pound pack around, and just be able to enjoy being outside and hanging out with my husband and my dog,
Tiff's vision of better is actually a pretty specific one. Camera, backpack, husband, dog. Red, who talked about her back pain in part 2, told us what better meant to her.
What better is to me is, yes, you're going to have pain, but there's going to be days where you can actually have fun. You'll have good days. I'm not saying that your pain's going to go away permanently or anything like that. It's just that at first, when it first happens, it seems like that's all life is going to be. It's that immediate, intense pain. And it's not.
Red has come to her own understanding of what getting better means. However, her insurance company had different ideas.
You know, they when they revoked or refused to renew my physical therapy, it point out blank said on there, you know, short-term goals have been met, long-term goals of no pain are not realistic. And when I saw that, I was rather upset. I'm like, what? What are you guys telling me? I mean, okay, I understand that I'm going to have a life of pain now, but why can't I go to physical therapy? It was helping, you know? But it's like just that whole part, they said a long-term goal of no pain is not realistic. It's like, really kind of struck me like lightning. I was like, what do you mean? Thought I was going to get better, but I'm not, you know?
In situations like these, it can be difficult to say what is and isn't realistic. So that leaves us with the question, when it comes to chronic pain, what does healing or getting better really mean?
You gonna talk to Mom? Huh? You can talk to Mom. Oh, okay. We don't do this at home. Okay, come on.
Bailey, who we heard from in part 1, suffers from migraines and ataxia, a disorder where a person loses function in their muscles and nerves. She's here with her dog, Bailey, whose name she's borrowing on this show. Dog Bailey has had a profound impact on human Bailey's life. Human Bailey explains.
When there's a dysfunction in the balance system, part of it is the inability to get grounded. You can't get yourself anchored. Having the tension on Bailey's lead in my hand somehow anchors my brain. My previous dogs were much more active, wanted to just go snoop and, do other stuff. They walked me, I didn't walk them. So when I rescued Bailey, I enrolled in training, changed my life.
Now, the Baileys move through the world as a team, navigating cracked sidewalks and people who walk while texting as they make their way to the photography class that Human Bailey attends at Sac State.
There's no way I could walk from the parking lot to the classroom without, I'm just staggering. The uneven things like cobblestones completely confuse my brain. Walking with her, not only can I manage that farther, but it also notifies other people, here's somebody walking with a stick and a service dog, give her some space. Otherwise, students, they're concerned with their devices.
In addition to having a smart dog, Bailey also speaks to the importance of having smart goals. SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. For her, having goals like this helps keep her from overworking herself, which in turn helps her manage her symptoms.
Setting SMART goals can help keep the focus, even when you have chronic illness, to just do the short list. And I found that using that and letting myself off the hook from the previous standards of the longer list of to-dos makes it okay. There aren't that many things that really have to be done every day.
Just navigating day-to-day life can take up a lot of time and energy. Leonard, who we heard from in part 1, has tried a lot of different things to relieve his neck pain.
I've tried muscle relaxers, neck pillows, heat, cold. Heat hurts it because it inflames the muscles. Cold, for a little while, helps the muscles, but it hurts the arthritis. You take too hot a shower, you got to eat more pills. You take too cold a shower, you got to eat more pills. I'm starting to learn after all these years of pain that I'm not a young man anymore. That's my best therapy, is rest. But I don't like to rest.
There's a lot that friends, family, and loved ones can do to help someone with chronic pain. Even something like scheduling a time to hang out. Here's Tiff again.
You know, I can go out with a friend that understands if I have to cancel, or understands if I need to leave dinner early, or actually will say to me, "You look like you're starting to fade a little bit. Why don't you head home and we'll talk later?" I can be with that friend whenever because she gets it. And she just sent me a text this morning, "Hey friend, just seeing how your week's going." Those types of things are invaluable. Just seeing how you're doing, how are things going, or telling me a funny story, or even just asking, even if I can't come out with somebody, being asked and invited, because that's the other thing that happens is a lot of people just stop inviting you places, and it's hard to be forgotten like that. And so even just being, hey, do you want to go get a cup of coffee? Or can I stop by with some coffee for you, is even better.
When it comes to meaningful support from friends and family, sometimes it's just a matter of being there. Here's Frida, an artist with complex regional pain syndrome, who we heard from in part 2.
I want to share with you, I recently was with a few girlfriends, and we had an overnight stay in a hotel, and I had a seizure. And they hadn't witnessed that severe of an episode. A couple of them went to run a bath, but the gal that stayed with me, I was in the throes of pain and seizing, and I could hear her saying to me, "You are so amazing, you are so beautiful, I love you." And that cut through in the most remarkable way.
Sometimes support can come from unexpected places. A number of the folks we talked to are participants in ArtRx, a project developed by the UC Davis Center for Pain Medicine in partnership with the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento. The premise is simple. A group of people living with pain gathers in the Crocker Art Gallery to talk about art. The program is free and open to any individual with chronic pain as well as their family and friends. Frida is one of the participants of ArtRx and told us about it.
ArtRx levels the playing field so that when you go in, you're with others that you don't even have to talk to a person you know, that they are suffering in some way. And yet, it's not this kind of negative where we're sitting around talking about our pain. We're looking at art, and we're again getting out of our bodies and out of that sometimes daily grind, But once we're there, we're all sitting at the same level. I'm not having to look up and feel less than, if that makes sense.
Bailey, who we heard from a little earlier, is also a participant.
It was not at all what I expected. When I read about it initially, I thought, is everybody going to talk about their pain? Well, nobody talked about their pain. And some obviously had identifiable pain. Some people in wheelchairs, some people, using a walker or walking stick or whatever. But when we introduced ourselves, nobody described their pain. The time is spent on the art.
ArtRx is a great example of how a social activity can be therapeutic. It says a lot about the power of diversion, social support, and the importance of finding and nurturing positive activities and interests. When James, who suffers from spinal injuries and fibromyalgia, had to come down off a high dose of pain medication, it became clear that he was due for a change.
I just reached the point where I knew it was time to stop doing what I was doing, because I was, in my own mind, I was at the end of my life. nearing 50 years old, and I was ready to go. And then you start thinking about when's it going to stop? When's it going to end? And that's futile. That's just completely defeating.
James told us about the impact that faith had on his ability to rebuild a meaningful life. It led him to volunteer at Celebrate Recovery, a faith-based program focused on personal healing and community service. It started with a conversation with his behavioral health counselor.
He said, "Are you doing 12-step meetings?" And no, I've been there, done that, did that for years, and I'm beyond that. He said, "Well, have you heard of Celebrate Recovery?" No. And he said, "Oh, well, great, there's one tonight." And I went that night, and I got put into service immediately in the kitchen, and I've been going ever since. That was last year, right around this time, so it's been just over a year. And that has played a huge role in everything I do.
Now, James is incredibly active.
Can I take you through my week? On Mondays, typically that's an off day. I'll kind of hang out at home. And then Tuesday is my all-day cooking day for Celebrate Recovery. That's my 18, 19-hour day. And then Wednesday, now I'm doing a prayer group on Wednesday morning at 5:30. Then I have a step study for Celebrate Recovery that I'm doing Wednesday night. And then on Thursday, that's kind of an off day. Friday is another Celebrate Recovery cook day. So it's 14, 15-hour day on Friday.
And those are just the weekdays. It's not that James doesn't hurt. It's just that doing this helps.
So yes, there's lots of pain. But like I said, the key is staying busy, because what happens when we're in so much pain, our little brain, all it can see and all it can focus on is that pain. It just wants to get rid of that pain. It wants to relieve it. It wants to have some comfort and some relaxation. And the more you lay around and do nothing, the more your brain focuses on that. But if you keep your brain occupied, the pain it moves into the background. And if you're doing something especially that you like doing, or that you love doing, or that is fun and exciting, the less the pain will control you, the less you focus on it. It's all a matter of focus.
Olivia, who we heard from in part 1, has found that focusing on her work as an educator helps give her a temporary reprieve from her headaches and back pain.
One of the things that makes me know that I'm in the right job, because I teach, I know if I'm having a really bad pain day, I know that if I can get into the room and I can get into the zone, I will feel better for that hour or that hour and a half. And sometimes I will walk out of the room, usually with some students talking to me, and then by the time I get to the car, I feel like I get hit by a wall of the pain coming back into my body. And it's just such a strange sensation. I'm like, oh, that's right. Kind of as if this other activity muted it, and then the second I'm not in the room anymore and whatever endorphins I'm getting from that action aren't flowing anymore, it's just like, okay, the pain's back. I'm so very lucky to have a job that's fulfilling and that I love.
In addition to teaching, Olivia is also a stand-up comic. Comedy is another thing that has helped her work through her experiences with pain while sharing some funny medical stories along the way.
You know, there's definitely something about comedy as a tool to help people cope. And it's a very clear observation that people make, right? That usually comics have something dysfunctional in the background of their life, and this is a way that that comes out or works out creatively. But, you know, just something that makes you Jones for the laugh or need the laugh. And so comedy, I think, is definitely really good that way.
For Olivia, it runs in the family.
I remember my grandmother telling me once when I called her when she was pretty frail, and she told me that she'd broken her hand. And I said, well, how did you break your hand? And she said, well, I was sitting there and I saw a mosquito on the wall and I smushed the mosquito and broke my hand. And she was laughing. I said, you know, it's not technically funny. It's actually really sad. But I understood completely why she would laugh while telling me that story, because that's sort of who she was and that's sort of who I am, and that I tend to tell the stories while laughing.
Roxanne, who we heard from in part 2 and who suffers from adhesions, also has a background in comedy. She's found relief in humor even off stage.
I'll tell people, hey, look, I'm living the dream. Supermodel bod, 70s hair, designer wardrobe. Everybody wants to be me. They say laughter releases endorphins. For me, to hear people laugh releases endorphins. And if I can make someone smile or laugh, I feel like instantly better.
There's no one right way to build a life when living in pain. There's comedy, and there's art, dogs, photography, and then sometimes there are hummingbirds.
Yeah, figure out what gives you joy and try to do that as much as possible. I can't go out and dig up an acre of ground anymore, but I can feed the hundreds of hummingbirds I have every summer. Last year, my maximum sugar consumption for 1 month, 42 pounds. I have hundreds of hummingbirds. And I have every color, every shape, you walk out my front door, you could lose an eyeball. There's just that many of them. Yeah, so cool.
In the same way pain shows up differently for each person, so does healing. It might not be absolute or obvious, and it might even be hovering outside right by the bird feeder. Pain intersects with all our lives in complicated ways. Whether temporary or permanent, spoken or unspoken, it's a force that shapes physical, psychological, and emotional worlds. Pain is supposed to protect us, to tell us something's wrong. It definitely is something to listen to rest when you need to carry a lighter backpack, to pull back your hand from a searing hot kettle. But it's also important to listen to pain in other ways, to listen to someone that needs help, to learn how to be a more supportive partner, to make space for the stories and the experiences that are shaped by this invisible force. We might still have trouble talking about pain. We still might not want to be the one to bring it up over dinner. Doctor's appointments might be shorter than we'd like. And we might not have the clinical tools, let alone even the right words, to describe the way we feel or respond to the way someone else feels. But if you take anything away from this program today, we hope it's something to do with the wonder and the surprise and the value of just listening. So, thanks for listening. Outpatient Radio is produced by the UC Davis Center for Design in the Public Interest for KKRN 88.5 FM in Round Mountain, California. KKRN is a listener-supported community station, so show them some love for us at kkrn.org. This was truly an inter-county effort. We're grateful to the good folks at Hill Country Health and Wellness Center in Round Mountain and in Redding for their ongoing support of this project. The Office of Research at the University of California, Davis provides funding for the Center for Design in the Public Interest via its Interdisciplinary Frontiers in the Humanities and Arts initiative. We'd also like to thank Ian Kobner and Aaron Dorn of ArtRx for their support, and the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento for letting us use their beautiful space. For more info on ArtRx, you can Google ArtRx at UC Davis. And of course, to our incredible participants, Tiff, Bailey, Olivia, Frida, James, Roxanne, Leonard, and Red, thank you. We are the UC Davis Center for Design in the Public Interest, or DiPi for short. We've been working with patients and doctors to improve pain communication. If you're interested in following along with Outpatient Radio or in just learning more about our other projects, you can check us out online at dipi.design. That's all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care.